Hey everyone, how's it going? So I wanted to do another video that's a little bit different for me. So a few weeks ago, I posted a video talking about bookish double features, pairs of two books that go really well together as a sort of double feature. Today, what I want to talk about is book and film pairs. So sort of double features, but for a book and a film rather than two books or two films. And so these are going to be pairs of books and films that I think just resonate with each other very well. Thematically, in terms of their setting, in terms of their characters, and so on and so forth. So they're kind of pairs where I think reading the book and watching the film in close proximity would be really interesting and would maybe illuminate some aspects of the two works that you might not have seen otherwise. So I'm going to talk about three pairs. So one book, one film per pair. And I'm going to start with the book and film pair that really gave me the idea for this video. So with this first pair, I actually read this book this year, and then reading that book inspired me to rewatch the film because I thought they seemed like such an interesting couple in terms of their themes and settings and so on. And it was really kind of cool to read that book and rewatch this movie in such close proximity. So that pair is Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, published in 2021, and After Yang, directed by Kogonada and released in 2021. This is the only pair where the book and the film were also released in the same year. That is not the case for either of the other pairs. It is a really neat coincidence that these two works did come out in the same year, because the similarities between them are quite striking, and I hope to make that fairly obvious as I describe them both to you. So to start with Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, this takes place in a near future America. And in this near future America, we have a couple of developments that become important to the story. So the probably most important aspect of this near future America is that there are these androids known as artificial friends who are sort of artificial intelligence humans. They look and act like humans for all intents and purposes, but they're artificial intelligence. And they are solar powered. They're powered by the sun, right? So they need to sit in the sun to charge and such. And the title character, Klara, is one of these androids. She's referred to as an artificial friend or an AF. And these AFs, these artificial friends, are often purchased by families who can afford them to be companions for their children. So another aspect of this near future is that a lot of social interactions, in-person social interactions, have kind of disappeared. A lot of interaction, human interaction, is done virtually, through what we might think of as Zoom now, or Skype. So a lot of young people feel rather lonely and don't have very well-developed social skills because they're not meeting and talking to real people. And so some families will get an artificial friend for their child to keep them from getting lonely. And so Klara is an artificial friend. She's purchased by a family, and she's purchased to be a companion for a teenage girl named Josie. And Josie is 14 or 15 years old, and she has been lifted, as it's referred to. And basically what being lifted means is that she's had genetic modifications done on her. So another aspect of this near future is that we've achieved the ability to kind of modify genes to give people certain qualities. And so a lot of families in this near future will have their children's genes modified to enhance their academic ability. And so Josie has been lifted, okay? But one of the possible side effects of being lifted is that sometimes the person who has been lifted also suffers from health problems. And so Josie is not in good health. She's very sickly, and it's understood that she's unlikely to survive very long. So Klara is this companion for this girl who seems to be dying. And there's a lot more to the book. I can't do a full summary for this video, or else the video would go on super long. But this novel explores, as you might imagine, what it means to be human, as a lot of artificial intelligence stories do. But in particular, what it kind of explores is the idea of what makes an individual person an individual person. So is there some kind of incomprehensible essence to an individual that makes them them? So is there sort of an essence to Josie that makes Josie who she is, and Klara who she is? And, is there some essence inside of me that makes me Lukash? Is there some ghost in the shell, as you might say if you've seen the anime science fiction film Ghost in the Shell? And so it explores this idea. So this idea of whether there's an essence, or whether who we are as a person is really just made up of a lot of superficial qualities, of mannerisms, of interests, of verbal tics, and physical qualities, and so on. It explores this idea really powerfully. In addition to kind of whether Klara can be considered a person, which I think is a really interesting aspect of it as well. This novel also actually has a kind of religious element, or I guess I would say a quasi-religious element to it. So Klara, like all AFs, is powered by the sun. So she needs to sit in the sun to recharge. And because of this, she kind of actually views the sun as a quasi-god figure. And she actually, prays to the sun. And part of this novel, one aspect of the plot that starts to play a large part in it, is that Klara wants to make some kind of a sacrifice to the sun to save Josie's life. So that becomes an aspect of it as well. So there's a lot to chew on in Klara and the Sun, and I really, really love Klara and the Sun. And it's one of my favorite books that I've read this year for the first time. And then the film I'm pairing it with is After Yang. So this, again, was released in 2021, directed by Kogonada. Kogonada formerly was known as a video essayist. He did a lot of special features for the Criterion Collection and so on, but then he went on to become a film director. This is the only film by him that I've seen, but it is a banger. It is a great, great film. Definitely one of the best science fiction films out there, I think. So this film, like Klara and the Sun, takes place in a near future where certain families can get androids powered by artificial intelligence to be companions for them or their children. So Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith play a married couple who have an adopted daughter named Mika, and this daughter who they adopted is of Chinese heritage, but the couple are not. And so, to kind of help Mika sort of stay in touch with her Chinese heritage, they got an android to be her companion who was sort of programmed to be Chinese. So he looks Asian, he's played by an Asian character, he knows all these facts about China and Chinese culture and history and so on, and things about tea in China and all this stuff. And so they got this android to be their daughter's companion, and the android is named Yang, so hence the title. And what happens at the beginning of the film, so Mika has become very attached to Yang. She thinks of him as, a close friend, almost like a brother. And what happens at the beginning of the film is Yang stops working. He malfunctions, and he just sort of shuts down and doesn't appear to be working anymore. And the events of the film are Colin Farrell's character trying to get him fixed, basically. He takes him from mechanic shop to mechanic shop trying to get him fixed. And throughout the film, we kind of find out, too, about Yang's life before he was owned by the Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith family, what he did before he was with them. And what's so interesting about this film is it doesn't just explore that sort of classic artificial intelligence question of, what makes someone human, right? Is this artificial intelligence android, can we consider it human? Most films about artificial intelligence, I think, do that to some degree. But it also kind of interrogates the question itself, right? It interrogates why is it that whenever we think of artificial intelligence, why is it that we always wonder, does it want to be human? Is it going to be human? What if artificial intelligence like Yang doesn't really want to be human? Or if it is sentient, maybe it isn't human. Maybe it's something fundamentally alien, right? So it kind of critiques this idea, that it kind of critiques the asking of the question of, is this artificial intelligence human or not? And so that's kind of a really powerful part of the film. There's a lot more to chew on in After Yang. Actually, what's really impressive about it is that it's not really a long film. I don't even think it quite makes it to the 90-minute mark. It's not even an hour and a half, and yet there are so many aspects of it to chew on. There's more to it that I haven't even talked about here. People who've seen it will notice the gaps I left in my description of the story. But so these make for a brilliant pair, right? They both explore artificial intelligence in a really unconventional way, I think. Again, sort of in a way that doesn't just settle for that classic question of, is the artificial intelligence human or not? They do both explore that, but they explore so much more than that. But, I mean, even just the superficial similarities, right? In both stories, we have a family buying an android to be a companion for their child. And, I mean, that by itself would make them an interesting pair. So, anyway, this is a great pairing, I think, and I would heartily recommend, if you've read Klara and the Sun and you like it, go watch After Yang. If you like After Yang, you will almost certainly like Klara and the Sun. Right. So, moving on to my second pairing. Very different animal. Very, very different animal in kind of a literal sense. So my second pairing is Moby-Dick by Herman Melville, published in 1851, and Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which is directed by Werner Herzog and was released in 1972. So hence why very different animal, right? We have Moby-Dick, of course, which I suspect doesn't need a lot of introduction to a lot of people, but just to give you the rundown, Moby-Dick is about a guy named Ishmael who finds a friend, a Polynesian friend named Queequeg, and they find work on the Pequod, a whaling ship that's about to set out on a whaling trip. And the captain of this ship is the famous Captain Ahab. And the story of the novel Moby-Dick is sort of, on the one hand, Ishmael and Queequeg starting life on this whaling ship, but more importantly, we have Captain Ahab's maniacal quest to find and kill the whale that gives the novel its title, right? Moby-Dick. Moby-Dick is this white whale who took off Ahab's leg. Captain Ahab is kind of the origin of the one-legged sea captain. Moby-Dick took off his leg, and he wants revenge on Moby-Dick for taking his leg. And so the story of this book, the plot of it, is about Ahab's egomaniacal quest to kill Moby-Dick. And but the novel has another side to it, which are famously usually called the whaling chapters or the cetology chapters, which are this kind of almost quasi-documentary elaboration on whales and whaling, the minutiae of how you go about hunting a whale down, what you do with the whale once it's killed, extract its fat, extract the oil from the fat, but also information about the lives of whales, right? How do they live? And mythology around whales, and so on and so forth. So on the one hand, there's this maniacal quest by Ahab to kill Moby-Dick. And on the other hand, we have this sort of documentary exposition on whales and whaling, right? So that's Moby-Dick. And then we get to Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which I love this film so much. It's about Lope de Aguirre, hence the title, Aguirre, The Wrath of God, who is a Spanish conquistador who, at the beginning of the film, is in the jungles of South America under the command of the conquistador Gonzalo Pizarro, right? So this takes place, I assume, sometime in the 1500s or 1600s. and they are in the jungles of South America seeking out the city of El Dorado, right? This mythical city of gold, thought to be somewhere in the jungle. And they think they're going to find El Dorado and become rich and famous, of course. And at the beginning of this film, Gonzalo Pizarro is in this jungle with a huge party, and this jungle is extremely inhospitable. And so at a certain point, Pizarro decides that they can't all continue on, that most of their party will camp out in one spot, and they will send a smaller party ahead of the rest of them to try to map out an easier route for all of them to the city of El Dorado. And Aguirre is a part of that little group who go on ahead. And basically we follow that little group as they go down this river. I think it's the Amazon River, but I'm not quite certain. And we see them kind of descend into egomania and madness, right? We actually see this little band of people who are literally sailing down this river on a raft in this hostile jungle. We see them declare one person among them the Emperor of El Dorado, right? Even though he's literally just this guy on a raft. And he's even given a throne of wood on this raft. We see this party kind of descend into these egomaniacal delusions. And they do this as they, run out of food and they're attacked by hostile natives. And we just see their situation become more and more desperate. And the egomania of Aguirre himself really starts to leap out at a certain point and become the centerpiece of this film. And it culminates in this iconic scene where Aguirre says, "When I, Aguirre, want the birds to drop dead from the trees, then the birds will drop dead from the trees. I am the wrath of God. The earth I walk upon sees me and quakes." So it's this exploration of egomania in a really hostile environment, similar to Moby-Dick. But in addition, it's also this kind of existential exploration of the human condition. You can kind of see Aguirre and this party on this raft who think they're these supreme rulers who are going to conquer the world, and they declare one of their own the emperor. You can see them as kind of a metaphor for humans in general, that all of us are kind of like that we think we're these grand emperors who are rich and powerful, but in reality we're just on this wood raft going down a hostile jungle, and we're going to get killed by indigenous people pretty soon. And so there's that element of it. And then you can also, I think, see Aguirre, and this is actually something that it doesn't share with Moby-Dick, which is, it maybe does to a degree, but not quite as much. You can also see it as kind of being about the idiocy of imperialism, right? This film is thought to be, to a degree, a commentary on the Vietnam War, which was still ongoing when it came out. And so I think it can also be seen as a commentary on the idiocy of imperialism, right? The egomania of thinking that you can go in and subject a people to your rule. And we see that play out in the way that this band is set upon by the indigenous peoples around them, right? So, once again, I think the similarities are pretty clear. They both have these explorations of egomania. In Ahab, of course, it's his quest for Moby-Dick, right? He thinks of Moby-Dick as his arch enemy, right? He thinks that Moby-Dick is this sort of quasi-cosmic foe, and he thinks of his quest against Moby-Dick as this fight against evil, kind of. But in reality, the whale, Moby-Dick, the white whale, probably doesn't even know or care who Captain Ahab is. He's just another tiny human who he can kill pretty easily if he wants to. Right? And so Ahab's quest is ultimately this not only futile quest, but also really wasteful, as we see. And Aguirre as well, extremely egomaniacal. But they also, I think, share something that maybe that didn't leap out to me when I first started thinking about this pairing. What they also share, I think, is that kind of documentary aspect. Right? I mentioned the cetology chapters in Moby-Dick, and how it elaborates on the lives of whales and whaling and how whaling is done and all this, and mythology about whales. But there's also a bit of that in Aguirre. It's not nearly in the same depth as in Moby-Dick, but Werner Herzog, the director, is known for making these fictional films where he has this kind of hyperfixation on realism. The story of the making of Aguirre, the Wrath of God, is almost as interesting as the story of the film, because they actually shot on location. They went into the jungle and were on a real raft shooting this film. And parts of the film were influenced by what happened while they were trying to do it, because there were a lot of mishaps while they were doing it. But I think a bit more importantly than that is the really authentic portrayal of the jungle, and in particular the indigenous inhabitants. The indigenous peoples in Aguirre, the Wrath of God, are played by indigenous actors, speak their indigenous language, and they kind of comment on some of the ideas that these Westerners have, these Westerners who are trying to take them over have. So I think you also have a bit of that similarity in the documentary kind of approach to the subject matter, right? So Moby-Dick and Aguirre, the Wrath of God, I think would make a really cool pairing. So there's that. And then my very last pair. And while I was putting together my thoughts for this video, I realized that my first pair and this pair are both pairs of science fiction films, or a science fiction novel and science fiction film. That wasn't intentional, but it just happened. So this last pair is the book Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, which was published in 1993. And I would also, kind of hanging up in the corner here, just add the sequel, Parable of the Talents, which is also quite good, but I want to just talk about the one book. And I'm pairing it with the film Children of Men, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, and which was released in 2006. Now, Parable of the Sower. Talking about this book is always really, really eerie. So this is a science fiction novel. It starts, funnily enough, in the year 2024. It's kind of funny how some of these oldish science fiction books now, the years in which they take place often are like now in the past, or they're this year. Like Blade Runner, the film Blade Runner, I think takes place in 2019 or something, right? But the story takes place in a near future, and it's about a young black woman, a young black American woman named Lauren Olamina, and she's living in the LA area, the Los Angeles area in California. Her mother abused certain drugs while she was pregnant with Lauren, and so Lauren has something called hyperempathy, which means that she can feel all of the sensations of other people. Not all of them, but certain other people, she can feel their sensations, with a particular focus on the sort of pain that other people go through. So she kind of has this very literal kind of empathy to her. But in this future America that she's living in, what we see is that racial and ethnic tensions in America have boiled over to such a degree that different communities of people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds have kind of resegregated themselves. They don't trust each other anymore. And so Lauren grows up in this all-black community, kind of set off. But in this future America as well, we've seen environmental degradation start to cause massive droughts and wildfires. We see capitalist exploitation leading to a lot of people being unemployed or working for scraps or turning to crime. And in the sequel to the Parable of the Sower, which is called Parable of the Talents, we also, in this same universe, see a right-wing wannabe strongman be elected president with the slogan, wait for it, make America great again. I mean, Parable of the Sower was published in 1993. I can't quite remember when Parable of the Talents was published, but that's pretty eerie. And I will just say here, for those who are going to point it out, I know that Make America Great Again, of course, has a history before Trump came along, of course. It originated, I believe, in the Reagan years. But I think it's remarkable that Octavia Butler kind of saw that slogan was going to continue to be important in the history of America. So anyway, and one last thing that really leaps out when you read Parable of the Sower for the first time is the United States also has really degraded in terms of civil liberties. And the way that it happened was through Supreme Court decisions. So reading Parable of the Sower is extremely eerie. It's extremely eerie that it was published in 1993 and seeing all of the parallels to our current day and age now. Whenever conversations come up about dystopian books that are relevant, people bring up The Handmaid's Tale as kind of showing sort of where we're headed. I always say, I don't disagree. I mean, there's a lot of The Handmaid's Tale in what is going on in the United States right now, but if you really want to see a dystopia that almost doesn't even feel much like a dystopia, it just kind of feels like either where we are or where we're going to be in a few years, I always tell people, go to the Parable of the Sower, because that's really where it's at. And so the story of the Parable of the Sower, though, is about Lauren and a sort of ragtag group trying to find some hope in this world that is extremely bleak, as I hope I've driven home how bleak this world is. She and a group of other people try to move from the LA area north to the American Northwest, I believe somewhere in Washington, and to found a new community there. Another side of the story is that Lauren starts to preach about the religion of Earthseed, as she calls it. An aspect of Parable of the Sower is there are these verses that Lauren writes that are kind of like her new scripture, her new revelation, right? Almost as though she's the Prophet Muhammad receiving the Quran or something. So there's multiple things going on in Parable of the Sower, but that's broadly what Parable of the Sower is about. And then the other side of this pair, Children of Men from 2006. Now, one interesting thing before I get into this that I thought was a funny coincidence is that the book that this is based on, so this is based on a book called The Children of Men. That book was published in the same year as Parable of the Sower. So I thought that was very interesting. But the film Children of Men, which based on a book, obviously, I haven't read the book, so not commenting on that, but Children of Men also is in a near future. And in this near future, women have become infertile. So mysteriously, it just happened that no new children are born, right? And so what's happened it's been 18 years since a child has been born in this near future. And what's happened is that basically there's no functioning society or government anymore, except for the United Kingdom. So the United Kingdom is kind of the last standing among functional governments in the world. But its government has kind of degenerated into this authoritarian, militaristic, and extremely racist right-wing regime. And a theme that comes through in this story is there are a lot of refugees trying to get into the United Kingdom from outside because it's known as the last surviving government. But they often are either imprisoned or killed or deported. So again, lots of parallels to kind of things going on right now. It's in the United Kingdom, but they apply anywhere. So the story is about a character played by Clive Owen, and he is trying to help this young woman who is played by Claire Hope Ashady. And this young woman is the first woman to become pregnant in 18 years. And so he's trying to help her just survive and give birth safely, but also trying to get her to safety because he knows that she, as the mother of the first baby in 18 years, there will be groups who will try to use her as a political pawn, right? And another wrinkle in this story is that her character, this young woman, is a refugee herself, is also black, and is also a former prostitute, right? And so that all comes into play as well. So there's a lot of different different moving pieces in this story. But again, like with Parable of the Sower, it's about trying to find hope in what is seemingly a hopeless world. So in both of these cases, to turn to the parallels, we've got a near future dystopia. I mean, arguably kind of post-apocalyptic in the case of Children of Men, but a dystopian future that is horribly bleak. And we see the characters trying to find some semblance of hope. We see a lot of other parallels, of course. Race comes to play in both really strongly. We see the experience of refugees in both. Rampant capitalism and how that plays a role. And both, I think, most powerfully, both also have this backdrop of religion as a theme. So as I said, Lauren starts to sort of elaborate on this religion called the Earthseed religion, right? And according to this religion, humans need to kind of go to another planet and start a new civilization that will be based on better values than our current civilization. And in Children of Men, the religious aspect is not as explicit, but there are a lot of religious references. So when Clive Owen's character first encounters the pregnant Claire Hope Ashety's character, there's this very strong reference to the manger, to the birth of Christ. And there are other references to that as well. Anyway, both these stories are really powerful sort of science fiction stories about finding hope in a seemingly hopeless world. So, anyway, those are my book and film pairings. I hope you all enjoyed. I would be really curious to hear any book and film pairings that you all would like to suggest. So please feel free to leave them in the comments. And anyway, I might, like with my Bookish Double Features video, I might consider doing like another iteration of this, because it obviously can lend itself to many iterations. But anyway, I will leave it at that for now, and talk to you all again soon.